Hello and welcome back to the Four Estates YouTube channel. Hope everyone is well and feeling positive and you've been engaging with the videos. This video is Songwriting and Composition Tutorial 5, and we're going to be looking at rhythms and how they relate to regions of the world and cultures, and what are the key defining elements of particular rhythmic styles. And as with earlier videos, I'm going to place timed links in the description below this video so you can jump to the various sections of the video, because there's going to be a few sections and it's going to be quite a long video, but I'm going to try and keep it as comprehensive and as brief as possible. So without further ado, I'm just going to start with an introduction here. So what is rhythm? What is meant by that? What's the definition of it? Well, here's my definition of it. So rhythm can be said to be the pattern of beats or markers in time that is followed in a piece of music. So how many times and at what different points a bass drum is struck in a sequence of music, similarly a snare drum, tambourine and so on, that is determined by the rhythm pattern that is being used. So just as we discussed in an earlier tutorial, the importance of the rhythm of words and how that played a big role in shaping not only the lyrics of the song but also the music. If, as the writer of a song, you've written the music first, the rhythm you have chosen for the music will shape the rhythm of the words. Yeah, it kind of sets the template that all the elements of a song have to follow. So I think it can be said without much argument that without the structure, the template or skeleton that rhythm provides, music starts to lose form or shape, and it becomes incoherent and difficult to follow and engage with. So rhythm is fundamental. It's fundamentally important. It's a building block and the foundation on which the notes sit. So what now about rhythms and cultures? I mentioned it briefly in the introduction. That's what I'm going to be looking at. So how do different cultures have different rhythms, and what does that mean? Is that important? So different countries and regions of the world and the cultures that are in place, so that's to say their traditions, their lifestyles and the beliefs that people follow, also have their own identifiable styles of music. And these styles of music are defined by the rhythms that they use, along with other things, but the rhythms are one of the key defining characteristics of these different styles of music from around the world. Now, I'm not an expert in the history of music by any means, and so I can't explain how it is that different rhythms have evolved in different parts of the world and in different cultures. But I can say that some rhythms are older than others, and some rhythms have travelled across the world as cultures that created them and used them have travelled also. And I'd like to say at this point that there is a really good short series that has just aired on the BBC exploring the music and rhythms of some of Latin America, Brazil, Cuba, and Puerto Rico in particular. This was on BBC 4 and it was presented by Huey Morgan, who is a musician himself and has his own show on Radio 6. And what was good, I thought, about this series is it highlighted the traditional music and some of the history for each of these countries in 3 episodes. So these are definitely worth checking out, and each episode gives real-world examples of what I'm trying to explain here, and also it shows how culture and music keeps changing and evolving, and how over time music and rhythms from different cultures can join together to create something new. So I will link that into the video somewhere, but essentially it's going to be on the iPlayer, and I can't remember what the series is called, but I will put a link in this video to that series on the BBC iPlayer. Okay, so I don't feel like I can go too much more into the history and the reasons of how cultures create different rhythms. As I just said, I don't know enough on the subject. What I will do is put some links to other videos that cover the history of certain rhythms in more detail at the end of this video. So let's look at some rhythms that are well known and well used around the world. Okay, so let's start with traditional folk music from the British Isles. And I'm going to include the Republic of Ireland in this because I think because of our closeness together in terms of distance, there are links between our folk music styles. So what's meant by folk music? So folk music obviously extends way beyond the boundaries of our country, the United Kingdom. And folk music really is, in essence, it's the earliest form of structured music that any culture has, wherever that culture may be. Now, what's interesting about the folk music of Europe is it's rhythmically linked, so there's rhythmic kind of like similarities between the folk music, different folk music types of Europe. So back to the British Isles and the main types of folk music here. And I'll try to just briefly describe 4 fundamental forms that can continue to be used and passed on today by current folk musicians. Now, the rhythms themselves within the different forms of folk music are not necessarily marked out by what we would see as a recognisable percussive instrument or drum. And it's the rhythms and the chords and melodies mixing together, played on various instruments such as the accordion, the guitar, the fiddle, which is a violin, and pipe instruments such as the bagpipe and Northumbrian pipes, which is just another form of bagpipe. Now, I'm going to throw up some pictures here of those instruments just so we know what we're talking about. So that's English folk music or folk music from the UK doesn't typically have a percussive instrument as part of the ensemble. However, in Irish folk music, there is a commonly used hand drum called the bodhrán, which is kind of like a large tambourine, but without the metal jingles that a tambourine has. And that's held in one hand and played with a small wooden beater by the other hand. So hopefully a picture of that will appear. And I'll also try and link a video of the bodhrán being played. So the bodhrán can be used to mark out the regular count of the rhythm and add extra elements that complement the basic beat and make it more interesting to the listener. Okay, so let's start with a form of traditional folk music. So we'll start with the jig. Now, jig is normally played in 6/8 or 9/8 time signature and at a fairly quick tempo. Right, so we have covered 6/8 before, haven't we, in another video. So jigs are especially used to dance to, and that's why they are of a fast tempo. And as I just said, there's one example of 6/8. I've covered that in Drum Tutorial 5, which you can find if you search the Four Estates YouTube channel. Next, we're going to mention a reel, R-E-E-L, and that is normally played in 2/4 or 4/4, which typically can be played at a fast tempo and is also very much used for dancers. And again, if you refer to Drum Tutorial 5, there is a description of 2/4 and 4/4 time signature there. Another form of traditional dance music is the hornpipe, which is usually in common time of 4/4. Now, as the name implies, these pieces of music were often written for or on a type of pipe instrument. So that could be like a flute or a what would we call so kind of like a flute that's played as like an orchestral flute, or you have like a penny whistle type flute, or could also be played on or written on a bagpipe or Northumbrian pipe, or even something called the Ilian pipes. And lastly, we have in this section we have waltzes and polkas, which are in 2/4 or 3/4 time and less fast in tempo than reels or jigs. So these are also used to dance too, but typically where people dance in pairs or perform routines or sequences with several other pairs of people. So that's generally what like waltzes in folk music and polkas and folk music are used to for. It's kind of communal dancing. And if you refer to drum tutorial 4, I've given a description of 3/4 time signature there. So that's all I'm going to talk about so far on folk music for the British Isles. I will link an example or two in this video in the usual place in the top right corner. So, just to summarise there, it's the rhythms in folk music are often given by the melodic or kind of musical instruments, and not necessarily by a percussive instrument. So that's what, when we look at other forms of music, that's what we might find is a difference between a folk music of like European or British folk music and other forms of cultural music from different places around the world. Okay, so let's move on to something else. Okay, let's look at the blues as a rhythmic form. So before I go any further in describing blues music, I just want to say that I'm trying to introduce these different types of music in the order of appearance in history. So oldest to newest, if that makes sense. So there's going to be a little bit of overlapping here and there, but in a general sense it should be right, I hope. Okay, so blues originates from North America and evolved out of the tradition of the storytelling aspect of folk music and some of the melodic aspects of gospel music. The songs that were sung in churches and gatherings of people from African American descent. The styles and patterns of singing heard in blues music can be traced back to the songs of African slaves who were forced to work in agriculture. Needless to say, a very shameful period in history. This is, however, what music has always provided cultures and peoples from around the world an opportunity to express how they are being treated and how bad, or maybe even sometimes how good, their lives are. So harking back again to tutorial 3, building on ideas, the rhythm used in words of those slave songs would dictate the rhythmic structure of the song. So it was typical for these songs to have what is known as a call and answer structure. So this is where a line is spoken by whoever is leading the song, and then it might be repeated, or a different line is sung together in unison by whoever else is singing the song. So for that to work, a gap is needed between the different parts that form the lines of the song. So this lends or tends to lend itself naturally to a sort of waltz or swing rhythm that has defined the rhythm of the blues. So what is interesting about how the blues works rhythmically in general is that it uses a repeating template or structure of a 4/4 time signature. which is, 4 beats to a bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that pattern, that repeating sequence, kind of is the framework of a blues song in terms of how and when chords change, or you shift to another key, or you might shift from a verse to a chorus. That's dictated to by a 4/4 time signature. But then you have a beat, so a rhythmic kind of pulse or beat of a 3/4 played over the top of that structural time signature. So, and this is often referred to in kind of contemporary music as a swing or a shuffle rhythm. Again, I've described the shuffle rhythm in Drum Tutorial 5, so you can check that out there if you want to know more about what the shuffle rhythm is. So, blues music could be said in the main to be played at a slow to medium tempo, but it also has a flexibility to be played fast enough to be used as a form of dance music. So that's the blues. Right, moving on. We're going to now look briefly at reggae music. So reggae is a form of music that is distinctly associated with rhythm, and it is the rhythmic patterns used in reggae that define it, arguably more than anything else. Reggae music originated in Jamaica, and it's influenced by African American music such as the blues, which we've just discussed, and also jazz. But I'm not going to go too much into the history here, as I'm going to link a video at the end of this one, which gives a brief history of the evolution of reggae. So let's look at the elements of the rhythm of reggae and what makes that distinctive. So as with lots of music forms that use common time, which is a 4/4 beat, which we've just discussed in blues, and it's also there present in folk music, or compound time, such as 6/8, again, folk or waltz type rhythm. The first beat of the bar, and both of those time signatures, 4/4 and 6/8, commonly the first beat of the bar or the one is fundamental to marking out the pattern of the beat. So it's like a key reference point, like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 is a key reference point. And this is often played on a drum, but it will always be, present within the music, accentuated on the instruments playing it if there is no drums or percussion. However, with the most widely used form of reggae, the emphasis of the beat pattern is taken off the first beat of the bar, or the 1, and placed on the third beat of the bar. Yeah, which is often called like the backbeat. That's referred to sometimes as the third beat in the bar as the backbeat, which is the beat a snare drum typically would appear in a kind of like a standard 4/4 beat in Western music. So this is especially we hear this especially, so this kind of switching round of the emphasis of the beats. It's heard especially on the drums or drum kit, where the first beat of the bar, which would typically in other forms of music be accentuated, as I've just said, on the or accented on the bass drum, is accented typically only on the hi-hat. Yeah. So the 1's kind of only kind of emphasised on the hi-hat. You're not hearing it on the bass drum or on another drum. And then the bass drum is used to accentuate the third beat of the bar, accompanied by something else. So like typically it would be a rim shot on the snare, or maybe a snare hit Often the snares take the actual snares are actually taken off the snare drum in reggae, or sometimes it can be just a strike on a tom. So on the third beat, you get a bass drum accompanied by something else. One of those things I just mentioned there. So it's kind of like an inverted or opposing pattern to that of a typical backbeat used in Western contemporary music, which we're going to kind of come on to shortly. So once again, I'm going to link a video to demonstrate that. So it should be a video with just a drum beat, and that's called like that particular, what I've just described, the emphasis being taken off the one, put on a three. It's called the one drop because you're dropping the one. So I'm going to hopefully link a video here somewhere demonstrating just the one drop being played on a drum kit. So what does this do? So this creates different feel and motion to the rhythm. It could be said it kind of creates a more of a bounce or a sway that isn't implied or created from other kind of forms of music that don't have this pattern. So with this pattern as the template or backbone, this one drop pattern, other instruments such as the bass guitar or 6-string guitar, whether that be electric or acoustic, keyboard, and also brass, which does quite often feature heavily in reggae music, can add counter rhythms over the top of this drum beat which I've just described. And these are also referred to as polyrhythms. And this further develops the feel and the interest of the music piece as a whole, to kind of work in tandem, but also kind of push against that rhythm. So it kind of like it gives it more of a swing or more of a kind of, it creates more of a, develops the complexity of the piece. So the additional rhythms that are played on the guitar and keyboard or organ are another distinctive element of reggae, because commonly the notes or chords that are played on the guitar or keyboard are a single beat duration, sort of like a very short duration, and this creates a kind of jagged sound that marks out the rhythm or beat pattern against that of the drums, which is what I've just been describing. And these are often referred to as guitar or organ stabs because they just come in for like one beat, So those are the main elements that make it distinctive and instantly recognisable, and so popular to dance to. And reggae has continued to develop and originate new forms of music with new and distinct rhythms such as dancehall and soca, SOCA, and it's now arguably more widely known and popular than it has ever been. So that's reggae. Okay, so now we're going to look at rock, pop, and contemporary. So I'm going to combine three fairly broad categories of music into one section here, as I feel they have a common time signature or signatures and common ways of marking out those signatures with beat patterns. So in other words, the rhythm patterns of these forms of music are kind of interchangeable between the forms. And these forms of music are not known specifically for their rhythms or categorized by a distinct rhythm. So, as I've just mentioned, these forms are rock, including rock and roll, pop, and contemporary. or to put them in a larger category even still, what we might describe as contemporary Western music. So that would be the music we hear a lot of in this country on the radio and television and, other forms of media. So there are many, many genres and subcategories of music that fall under the three main forms I've just mentioned there. And it would take a very, very long time indeed to try and cover them all, or even half of them. So I'm not going to try here. So, just as ska music, which was a forerunner to reggae, was beginning to take shape in Jamaica in the mid to late 1950s, rock and roll was starting to take shape in America, and its origins could be said to be blues music, already popular then in various parts of America, and rockabilly, which was an emerging form of country kind of folk music. So much like the blues, rock and roll relies heavily on the shuffle rhythm, already described, when we talked about blues earlier. So what might be said to be distinct about the evolution or development of rock and roll from the blues is a common use of a drum kit. So the drums will be playing a 3/4 shuffle pattern, and similarly with blues, the chord changes, were played on the guitar and bass guitar, use a 4/4 template, so they kind of change in that kind of common time, kind of standard to Western music kind of time signature of 4/4. Rock and roll could also said to generally be played at a faster tempo than the blues, and generally has a more of an uplifting feel and sentiment to it. Although counter rhythms are often played on the bass guitar in rock and roll music, in general it could be said that the instruments and melodic rhythms of the music sit side by side in parallel and don't tend to be that complex. So they kind of all kind of going in the same direction rhythmically, as it were. From rock and roll, the emergence of music predominantly played or defined by the electric guitar became universally popular in Western music culture. And it was rock and roll music that defined the shape of music groups that followed in terms of the instruments used. So essentially guitar, bass and drums. This instrument setup, or what we might call an ensemble, then helped to shape the music forms that followed, namely rock and pop music. So to look at rock music in general follows a set rhythm pattern and chord sequence pattern of 4/4. But what evolved as the music form evolved were more complex and elaborate drum beats that stay within the same time signature. And this, in combination with the emerging style of guitar playing that used a sequence of notes instead of chords as a melodic basis of songs, made for lots of scope in terms of rhythms and counter rhythms within that 4/4 common time signature, which in terms of the guitar, those sequence of notes we call a riff. So it's a kind of emergence of the guitar riff kind of came through rock music. So instead of changing the time signature or shifting the emphasis of the beats within it, like with reggae, to make the music more interesting or give a different feel, the space in between the cycles of the rhythm patterns were filled more creatively. There are exceptions to that. Obviously, different time signatures have been used in rock music, but it could be said that with rock and pop music developing in parallel, the 4/4 or backbeat rhythm became a kind of universally accepted template within Western music. So as for pop music, from the period after the peak of rock and roll's success or popularity in the late 1960s right up to the present day, what has just been said about rock music could also apply here. So pop arguably is a much bigger category of music than rock, with many more kind of subcategories within it. One category in particular that began to grow bigger from the time of the 1970s is that of the singer-songwriter, or the kind of solo artist, which is still a big category today. Now, with the exceptions that will appear on many individuals' artists' song history, where experimentation with different rhythm styles from different cultures have happened, in general, again, simple time or 4/4, and often compound time, which is 6/8, are the most widely used rhythms or rhythm kind of templates. Counter rhythms, which have been mentioned earlier and appear in most music forms from many different cultures, will again be introduced via melody lines played on various instruments within a piece. So that's kind of again similar to folk music. Counter rhythms, that's where counter rhythms are introduced in folk music. And they counter, so those kind of countering melody lines and other kind of elements will be countering the kind of chord rhythms that make up the backbone of the piece. So this, and this could be set for many other different forms of music, as I've just mentioned, folk, but it could be other forms of music adopt that kind of approach to introducing rhythms. Again, contemporary music is an umbrella term that covers a large span of categories, but here I'm using it to describe music that is being made and listened to currently in Western culture. So music that makes it most of the content on radio, television, social media. In particular, music that is produced on computer or electronically, such as R&B, rap music, and what might be described as boy or girl bands. So with R&B and rap music, it is more common than in pop music to use different rhythm styles such as Latin and African. So we do get kind of like a we're moving away. There's not the strict kind of conformity to the kind of 4/4 rhythm pattern. In rap and R&B, there's a bit more of an experimentation with different rhythm styles. And also the percussive or beat element of within any given song is much more dominant in those styles of music. So R&B and rap, really strong beat or rhythm is forms a very key element to the track, very dominant audible element to the track. However, the 4/4 time signature is still used to shape the changes within the track, as we've described, in other forms of music. Now, often the drum beat or beat elements of these forms of contemporary music are what is known as syncopated. So this is basically what was described when I talked about the reggae drum rhythm, stressing or accenting the offbeats. So with contemporary groups, solo artists, ensemble acts, boy-girl bands, it is much less common for syncopated rhythms to be used to underpin tracks. Common time or simple time rhythms will be more dominant. But once again, counter rhythms will be introduced through melody lines. So I hope that makes sense. That's a quick kind of summation of the rhythms of rock, pop and contemporary music. Latin music. Okay, so let's take a look at the heading of Latin music. Now, Latin music is defined almost entirely by its rhythms, and the rhythms and percussion instruments that play the rhythms very much take centre stage in the different forms of Latin music. So I will, throughout this segment, I'll be throwing up pictures of the typical percussion instruments used, some of which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. I introduced one in the last video, the guiro, made from a hollowed out gourd fruit, which gives a kind of ratchety sound. So as previously mentioned in the introduction section of this video, there has been a recent BBC series focusing on 3 countries that are big contributors to the body of Latin music, namely Brazil, Cuba and Puerto Rico. And what links these 3 countries in terms of history and culture is the peoples of Africa, Spain and Portugal, once again through the slave trade. Now, traditional African rhythms are at the origin or beginnings of Latin rhythms, and some of the melodic styles and instruments of Spain and Portugal help shape the musical forms and melodic forms of Latin music today. Now, there are other regions, obviously, considered to be under the heading of Latin America, with notable musical styles, such as Colombia, which has cumbia, which is becoming very popular now and has become a kind of like become electronic. It's an electronic form of cumbia now. Dominican Republic has bachata, merengue, and Argentina is famous for the tango. So Latin music styles are equally a form of dance as they are a musical expression. And the dance forms have been so widely adopted now throughout the world. Now, Latin music in of itself is a very expansive or large topic, and to cover it would take many videos to tackle in any sort of depth. So I'm going to focus on 2 styles that are well known to us across Western culture, which are samba and salsa. Samba originates from Brazil and has a very distinctive feel to it, as it is played with a 2/4 time signature. So like 1, 2, 1, 2, which is like a march, but with a swing or syncopated beats. So the main 2 beats of the bar are closer together than they would be in a traditional kind of European march. And over the top of the backbone rhythm, there are multiple layers of counter rhythms played on many different percussion pieces or instruments. And there's a large amount of drums used, and a large sound of the drums is created. And those 2 things are one of the main characteristics of samba music. So samba marching bands, I'm sure you will be familiar with, have become popular in this country and for many years now, and found in lots of different communities. And it's a great group participation activity to be part of a samba drumming group or any kind of drumming group. So specifically about the rhythm of samba music and what the drums are doing is syncopation and polyrhythms are very key to the distinctive sound and appeal of Latin music. And that is also certainly the case for salsa. So salsa has its origins in the Cuban music style son, and came to prominence in New York City in America through the immigrant communities there of Cuban and other South American and Caribbean people. Now, just as with samba, it has been widely adopted and enjoyed in Europe and in other parts of the world, notably for the dance style that accompanies it. Salsa is structured around 4/4 time, but does often have elements that use 3/4 over the top of the basic fundamental beat. That again, not dissimilar from rock and roll and blues. But the 3/4 and in general the backbone rhythms will be syncopated, so the influence will be on the different beats of the bar than they would be in blues or rock and roll. So again, a reggae would be a good reference point here, where the second and third beat of the bar are typically emphasized more than the first beat or the one. So this gives it a distinctive swing or jump to the rhythm pattern, and instantly invites you to move along to it. So that is why it's become so popular as a dance form across the world today. Okay, so final section, I'm going to talk about dance music. So what do I mean by dance music? As I've already described in the previous sections, how different styles of music from different cultures are strongly linked to forms of dance. So in this case, I'm talking about contemporary genre of electronic dance music. Music that became popular in the 1990s in Western culture, and it still remains very popular today. So just as with other categories of music, dance music has over time grown and divided into many subcategories or genres, which I'm not going to try and cover here because I haven't got time, there's too many. So I'm going to use what I feel is the first big style that's defined the start of dance music, house music, to describe in general the rhythm elements that are most prominent and make the style so instantly recognizable. So as the name implies, the genre as a whole is made for people to dance to, and a strong and prominent beat or rhythm track is the best element or feature or tool in music you can use to make that as easy as and attractive for dancing. So house and dance music in general have very prominent drum or beat tracks, and with only very rare exceptions, are always in 4/4 time signature. One key element of the rhythms used with this music is a dominant bass drum sound on every beat in the bar, or sometimes, on the first beat and alternate beat in the bar, so the 1 and the 3. But very commonly it's on every single beat in the bar, so it's on the 1, 2, 3, 4. So you hear a very prominent bass drum on all of those beats. Now, this is more than anything, this is the defining feature of the style of dance music. Often the beat tracks are quite simple in structure, with just a bass drum and maybe a hi-hat or similar sort of metal percussive instrument type sound, which accounts the 8th or 16th notes in the bar, which would be like equivalent to playing the hi-hat with both hands, if you played the drum kit. And often a clap sound will typically replace a snare drum sound and might be used at the same place where a snare drum would typically land in a common beat. And added rhythm elements that cross or syncopate with the beat track will come from bass lines and other melodic lines, or just sound layers. So the tempo of dance music will always be moderate or to fast, and very rarely slow, because it's there for people to dance to. So the tempo tends to be quite high, and the production style, which is quite sparse, there's not a lot of sound going on, allows for the tracks to be sped up or slowed down by the equipment they're being played on, by the DJ, for example. And the simple and widely used form of drum or beat track on house music records allows for the easy mixing or blending of the two tracks together being played simultaneously. So that's me. So, you can have two tracks playing at the same time and mix them together. And this has given rise to the significance of DJs and the venues that they played at in the dance music scene from the 1990s onwards. So there we go. I think that covers dance music. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video tutorial on rhythms and culture. I hope this is going to be of use to you. But just before you go, I want to draw your attention to two links to videos here that feature musical styles with interesting rhythms that I didn't get a chance to mention in the main video, and they are high life that originates out of Ghana and West Africa, and funk that originates out of America. Both of these rhythms use syncopation and have many different layers of interesting rhythmic components going on. So I think the high life video should give you a little history of the origin of that music, and the funk track is one of my favourites, so please check them out. Okay, so as usual, please comment below the video with questions or suggestions, and until the next one, bye for now.